Thank you, Steve. That was very nice words. Thank you. So, hello, everyone. Good to be here again. It's been a while due to other service commitments. My name is Anette, and I'm an alcoholic. Uh, I'm from Sweden in Northern Europe. And first of all, I would like to thank this group and Steve for asking me here. I love this book, I love this program, and I absolutely love the results produced. It's a new way of life, definitely. The fact that I'm neatly scared by doing this in English is not by far as big as that love. So here I am, and I'll do my best. My sobriety date is New Year's Eve 2012. That day, my life was over, you might say. And it had been over for a very long time already. What I was way later to discover was that it hadn't even started yet. I didn't know what life was. But that New Year's Eve, I was so exhausted from drinking that I couldn't drink anymore. I felt like a dry desert, kind of, both physically, but most of all, emotionally. I was done, really done. I wanted to keep on drinking. It was the only thing I could think of, but I simply couldn't. I was too sick. I had a few weeks off from work, and on New Year's, I was a total wreck, worse than ever before. I was so ill that I didn't even manage to get drunk. I tried, but I couldn't. Instead, the day went off and resulted with me sitting in an AA meeting crying that night, and I felt totally lost and my life was over. After that, I haven't had to drink up till now, almost 10 years later. This does not mean that this first time was a pleasant experience, because it was not. I was used to this meeting thing. I had gone to an incredible amount of meetings during that fall, still drinking, 1-2 meetings a day, seven days a week, and drinking between. A lot of people in there told me to come back because it works, which I did. I came back and I came back. The thing was that it took quite a long time before this worked for me, and it then turned out that it was not going to the meetings that worked out, but something completely different. My first year or years, 1.5 years sober, I didn't have any solution to my alcoholism, and I surely didn't understand that I did not have a solution. I had a lot of thoughts about this program, and I sat in all these meeting rooms and read these steps in 12 and 12 and the ones hanging from the wall over and over again. I reasoned in my head that what they were about. I did my own interpretations of them, you could say. I figured I was totally in this program. I'm really doing this 12-step thing, going to a lot of meetings, reading the 12 and 12, fighting alcohol on social media, sharing about my problems, because that's a way of helping others to maybe fight that thought about the first drink and so on. Just don't take the first drink. I greeted relapsers coming back with, thank God you took this relapse so you can help me not taking one. This is just mean, but I didn't understand that at the moment. But that's also how it was talked about the program in the meetings that I went to. That you were in the program when you were in the fellowship, when you went to meetings. You were in the program if you said you were. To be in the program was to show up at the meetings and share about your day or week. It was a place to take all my personal troubles. The picture was that the fellowship and the program were the same thing, absolutely. And I also spread those things gladly, those AA things. I thought I found what was to be found. I think we all did. At one of those meetings, I picked up from somewhere that there was something called sponsors who could help you with the program. I asked for a sponsor in a lot of meetings, but I didn't get no answers for quite a while, a few months. After one of those meetings, there finally was a man who secretly stuck a note in my pocket, a phone number. I felt this wasn't supposed to be mentioned to anyone. I don't know if that was the intention, but that's the way I received it. It was a secret between him and me. I called the number, and there was a woman who said she could help me with the program. Thank God. I started reading with her instructions, the 12 and 12 again, and I called her now and then. It was the instruction also. I didn't understand much of what we were doing. It was mostly thinking, as I remember it. And when I got to step 4, I wrote down everyone I was angry with. There were quite a lot of people. There were many. I was at this time a person so full of hate, angry, not a very nice person. And it took me almost 4 months to do this list. 4 months of complete insanity, but miraculously I didn't drink. I still don't understand why. By the time I got to step 5, I had written a life story about where I grew up and when I started drinking and things like that. Step 6 and 7 wasn't a big deal since I had mostly good traits, which I was instructed to find in my inventory in the 4th step. I made a few amends that, for the record, I later had to redo. And when I got to step 12, I was totally terrified. I said no to the first woman who asked for help because I was completely at loss. I didn't understand how to help her. I didn't understand what I had done myself either. This step work took almost all of my first year. In Sweden, we have a saying that is translated a step rocket. It's a person who makes the steps too quick. And the people in my group called me a step rocket. I took 12 months to do this. And during this time, of course, I got sicker and sicker, and I didn't understand why I wasn't feeling better. I did all the right things. I followed all the instructions I picked up at those meetings and from the sponsor. So almost 18 months passed, and my inner condition got worse and worse. And yes, you could say I was completely insane during this time, so bad that I even started to get really worried myself. It became quite clear to me what I had used the alcohol for, and that was, of course, to moderate my temper, and now I didn't have that protection anymore. The temper took off with full force. I was aggressive and outgoing and rabid in general. I had the daily tantrums and stuff like that, made full-on war in daily traffic and screamed and cursed wherever I went, basically. And as everyone understands, I created quite a lot of problems during this time, and I did it completely sober. I hadn't touched a drink in over a year. As time went on these first 2 years, I finally realized that something is going to happen, and it's probably not going to be a good thing. I was constantly walking around with a pulse of 140. Hatred, anger, and rage were my normal state of being. I couldn't concentrate on anything. I didn't hear what people say. The rage in my head was the only thing I heard. I wasn't, you couldn't get in contact with me, even though standing beside me and talking to me. The climax came when I was in the process of planning and nearly carrying out a crime that would have resulted in life in prison. I was hours close to putting myself in the middle of it, and I did all this completely sober. The planning, everything, totally sober. I was, as you can hear, crazier now than when I was still drinking, because when I was still drinking, I didn't do these things. in those moments, I woke up. There was some kind of awakening, and I went really scared. Was this me doing this? Me, a normal person with a husband, a job, a car, friends, a normal person. What I did with all these meetings I went to every single day wasn't enough. I started to understand that in my craziness. The step work I tried didn't work either. This 12-step thing didn't seem to work on me. The big problem was I didn't know what to do instead. Before this, I have tried everything, medications, psychologists, everything. Healers, mediums, you name it. I didn't get better, I got worse. I didn't get healthier, I got sicker. I was just as dying as I was when I came into the fellowship, although I may not have understood the extent of it at that time, but I can see it now. I was getting desperate to find a solution to this, as I, so to say, had been all the time, but now I got some extra fuel. I simply couldn't bear to live this way anymore. But I also didn't want to die. So, but what would that solution be? I did try the 12-step thing. I went kind of maniac about it, as a mentally obsessed person can be. So I started to traveling around Sweden like I don't know what, looking for something. Didn't really know what, just knew that I had to solve this existential problem I got. I went to lots of different conventions and meetings and speaker meetings in lots of different places around southern Sweden. I went around like a crazy person. After a few months, people all over Sweden knew me because I wasn't a nice person. You noticed when I entered the room. I spread some horrible energy around me. I drove around like this for a few months. I went also to healers and mediums and therapists. And finally, during a speakers event in an AA group in another part of our country, Sweden, I met two people who talked about the big book. I recognized it, yes, from the meetings I attended. Not that we had read from it, but it used to lay there on the table, so I had seen it. Then they started describing to me the story of how thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. What? Recovered? I went really provoked when I heard this because it didn't mesh at all with what I had been told by AA before, not at all. At the meetings at home, it was said that it takes as long to come out of the forest than as it took to go into it. It was said that you would always be recovering, that you would never be recovered. It was said that one will always be sick. It was said that it was the meetings that was the medicine against alcoholism, and therefore it was best to go at least one meeting a day, at least. One would be careful with the steps because they should take time. Each step had to land emotionally, and it could and should take years. That was the message I had heard before. And when these two guys said that it's possible to recover from this hopeless state and it could be done in a short time, it disturbed me. The cognitive dissonance was for real, for sure. But at that time, it really was a hopeless state for me. I know that, but I was really provoked by these two guys. It was a clash in my head, a total clash. But what I was told that day, already after an hour in, I instinctively understood that what they were talking about would solve my problem. I understood it. Don't ask me why or how. I just knew this will work. Why? Because there were no loopholes. It was waterproof. There wasn't a lot of choices, really. It was very black and white. It was simple. It was yes or no, no maybes, live or die. Which of it do we want to choose? There weren't a lot of different options I could choose from. I had begun to understand that when there was, I would choose the very wrong thing all by myself. I had already begun to notice that my mind wasn't always reliable. And that's why I understood that this very simple program would work for me, which it also did. These two wonderful guys, who also loved this big book, helped me the same day to get a sponsor. She lived in another part of Sweden, so we did this work via telephone. And about 3 weeks later, my life was fundamentally changed. The work in the big book had very little common with what I did before. But it did result in a spiritual experience, just like Bill's. It was overwhelming and it was wonderful, and life hasn't been the same since. This is almost 10 years ago, and that change hasn't really left me. It's still there. I had a complete psychic change, and I recovered from alcoholism. This anger and rage was replaced with contact with power. When in step 12, I was given a great urge to share this with others who had it the way I had. I know now that this is the spiritual experience in action. It moves forward. This story of how thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism is not as well known as it should be. And therefore, my main interest today, and since years, is to make it more known to as many people as possible. Because this program has the power to totally change lives in a very short time. And I got to get my own experience of just that. This book that we're talking about, that most people in here, of course, surely is familiar with, is printed in roughly 40 million copies or so. It's an incredible number of books, and it also tells us that there is something very important in this book. It was published in the late 30s, and it was written for one reason only. My opinions here now, one reason only, so that we can duplicate exactly what they did. Because if we can do the exact same thing as they did, we will get the same results. Had this not been written down, one can only imagine what it would have been like in a room like this with 22 people. Not a lot of people, but 22 people, it's enough. If I whisper a secret to Janne, who whispers it to Kickan, who whispers it to John, who whispers it to Leffe, with no doubt, it would be a completely different message when it arrives to the end receiver, with no doubt. There will probably be nothing left of what it was from the beginning. Then imagine that this message goes through a few million alcoholics. Well, the result will be 0, of course. I think this is what happened in a lot of groups and fellowships. That's why it's so very important that we stick to what's written in the big book, so that we can really do exactly what they did. The only instruction for the 12 steps is in this book, in no other book. There are lots of other 12-step literature as well, but this book is the mother of all 12 steps, the only one with these precise instructions. The only one. If we change anything in it, we will probably have some sort of instruction, and we'll probably get some sort of result, but we are not getting the result they are describing. Not. We will get a result, but not this one. given my first years in the fellowship, not in this fellowship, in the fellowship, without finding or hearing almost anything about AA's only solution, I can see how very dangerous it is when we start doing this. When it becomes a whisper game and we repeat it as some kind of truth, the inaccuracies we once learned to the next person who comes in, and she in turn will go on repeating the same deadly whispers to the next person, because we do not know what's in our own basic text. Many of us are so unaware of this book that we don't even know it exists. People who don't know this book will be dangerous in the 12-step group because we're not equipped with the facts of ourselves, and we might not even want to be. We have a problem, we don't know what it is, and we talk about the solution. We have no idea what it consists of. We will repeat the same one-liners that we ourselves were served. Things like, we have hours in Sweden, but the English, I don't know every one of them, but meeting makers make it. Think, put the plug in the jug, etc. We will spread these kind of solutions as confetti around us. And given what our basic problem is, the next alcoholic who comes in will hook this bait in an instant and walk straight towards big problems, probably life-threatening problems. So we need to learn what our basic text says. If we do not, we become dangerous. We're spreading a deadly message and we don't even know about it. We think we are doing good. I did, at least. So read the book and stick to it. Don't let anyone else tell you what the book says. Study it for yourself. Learn it, know it, explore it carefully. We need to know what it says. How else are we supposed to do the right thing? How? The thing is, if a new person comes into a meeting where basically everyone says the same thing, the solution described in this book, the possibility that this person actually follows the instructions will increase by several 100%. If there is someone, one person is enough, in the meeting saying something else, giving them an easier way, then that is the message the new one will hear. That message is deadly. That's why it's so important that we continue to share the knowledge of this book with everyone who wants it, that we help each other understand more of it, that we share generously what we find so that we together can keep it to what's in the book, no other things. That our focus is constantly on how we can share this with those who may need it, that we try to teach as many as we can, all we know about it, and they in turn do the same with others. This will, of course, make recovery possible for multiple others, and it will make life and growth a matter of course. Some of us, me, for example, have gone to meetings in various 12-step fellowships without ever being told that it's possible to recover from alcoholism. And they probably doesn't even know. Sad. And that's not at all how it looked from the start. And how did it look from the start? In the foreword to the second edition, it says, of alcoholics who came to AA and really tried, 50% got sober at once and remained that way. 50%. 25% sober up after some relapses, and among the remainder, those who stayed with AA showed improvement. Those are incredible numbers. And yet there were groups in Cleveland and Akron that had numbers of almost 100%. Sounds unbelievable, but is it really? There are clear causes and explanations to these numbers, and we can absolutely repeat this today. First, those who came to these groups were helped to diagnose themselves. Second, they learned that what solves the problem is God. This means that those who actually entered the meetings were there only to solve their problem with alcoholism with a spiritual solution. They already knew what the problem was, they knew what the solution was, and entered the meeting to solve it that way. Those who were not interested in a spiritual solution did not even get in there at all. Those meetings were the arena where the newcomer would be exposed to the solution, not to a lot of other things. And that's not how it looks today. Many who come into our rooms are far from ready to accept help at all. Some are almost there, and a few are completely ready. If easier ways are given to them, they will take them because they suffer from alcoholism. The problem is centered to the mind. I am going to choose these easier ways, whether I really want to or not, due to the fact that my programming as a sick alcoholic is that way. I'm constantly looking for those easier ways everywhere. It doesn't really matter what I want. And if you know something about step one, it's not weird, really. If we had been able to make these decisions, we wouldn't have been in a hopeless alcoholics. I hadn't been powerless at all. I could have made wise decisions pretty much all the way and probably never even needed any 12 steps. But I, who actually am an alcoholic, suffer from a mental disorder. My mind does not work like a healthy mind. When sick, I suffer from a disturbance of mind that manifests itself as not being able to make logical decisions based on my own situation. I will choose the wrong thing if I'm expected to start choosing. So if we do this, that is, we only talk about the solution to alcoholism in meetings, then that's what the newcomer will choose. Not all, but most, because there is nothing else to choose. Either you can walk out the door and go on to the bitter end, you know, the rest of it as best you can, or you can accept spiritual help, because that's the only help we got here. In here, we are doing spiritual help only. And if you don't get it, or maybe want it some other way, someone will talk to you and guide you to some other context that might be better suited. Few of these people will remain in a group like with this kind of unity. They will describe us like we are totally over the top. And then they will go to a place where they can get the space to talk about themselves and their day and how they feel. It's not at all a bad thing that this person walks another way. It's good. Because if he stays, he's going to ruin it for the next person coming in. He destroys the unity, the spiritual entity, because he doesn't share the same solution. But if you instead happen to want this spiritual help that we talk about here, we will do everything to help you. And you will recover just like the rest of us, and it won't take long either. If we manage as a group to have this approach today, we will also see these kind of numbers they describe in the forwards. I've seen it myself. It's not no possibility at all. In a group where there is this kind of unity and everyone, and then I mean everyone, not 90%, but everyone works together towards this common solution, there must be such figures. There is no other end result. But it requires discipline from everyone that we all stick to only what we're there to do, save lives. And the way we save lives is by the 12 steps. If I, as an alcoholic, who am a selfish and self-centered person, can manage with the help of the 12 steps to put my own ideas aside and start following a simple instruction, not only to myself, but also in the meetings, more people will recover, of course. In my head, this is humility. But sometimes our arrogance shines through when we won't stick to this, or when we let each other off the hook doing this, when we somehow have to talk about other things because we're selfish. That's what it is. We don't really care about how you're doing. If only we get to talk a little bit about ourselves or our mean bosses or boring wives for 20 minutes, it doesn't matter to us how you manage. Our only aim is to feel better, and we do it on your behalf. We will get you in life-threatening trouble not knowing it. This is maybe the worst form of ignorance. I hurt people and I don't even know it. With that, with destroying the group's consensus, that means we're deadly again. This is what we are like when we are sick with alcoholism, where we're selfish and it kills and the groups are dying. And this is exactly what we have to get away from. If we ourselves want to survive and also be able to help others survive, we have to get away from this way of being. In Sweden, we have a lot of Swedes here today. People like us are called Talibans. I don't know if you have that in US, but in Sweden we are called Talibans. We are not humble, we are militant, we are orthodox, we are harsh, we do not understand, and one should be aware of us, and we are this and we are that, a lot of things. But what could be more humble than putting my own ideas aside and instead follow a simple instruction without having to change it? I might want to talk about lots of other things and have a lot of other different ideas and interests, but it doesn't belong here. I'll take that somewhere else. In here, I'm sticking with this, precisely what's in the book. As a fellowship, we do not have the authority to teach any other method. To do otherwise is the assumption that we can be all things to all people. This implies that newcomers recover by our power and not that of a higher power. It implies that the message is not as important as the messenger. That is arrogance. Humility is the understanding that we can only teach what we were personally successful with. If we were successful with some other method than the 12 steps, we are simply in the wrong fellowship. When I entered a 12-step fellowship, AA in this case, I had no idea what its only message was. No idea. If someone says yoga, I will think it's yoga. If someone says they went to a healer, I will think it's a healer. If someone says don't take the first drink, I will think that's the message. I will try these things and I will find out that they do not work. So I will start to doubt the 12 steps, just like I did. Exactly. I tried, but it didn't work for me. This leaves those of us who actually have solved our problem with a great deal of responsibility. A responsibility to pass this message on. Which message am I passing on? It's a good question to ask oneself sometimes. This is what we should agree on. It's our main purpose, and in this we can cooperate. That is, achieve unity, because we stick to the point. When we stick to the point, we help others survive. Achieving this kind of unity in a group is the most important thing if we are to be useful at all. As soon as there is the slightest division in which solution we are talking about, it becomes destructive, and fewer people will recover, or none. I myself got the absolute grace to find a solution to this problem. I wasn't the one who did it, but when I became desperate enough to find a solution, God stepped into the room and began to steer in a completely different direction. It didn't at all look the way I wanted. I was offended and provoked and everything, I told you in the beginning. But it turned out to be exactly what I needed in the end. The last thing I tried was the first thing that actually worked. I met people who taught and lived some principles, and then I got the chance to survive and be happy. I recovered from this fatal condition, but it was hard to find them. Everyone doesn't find them. This experience, once I get this experience, which is our main and only purpose to help others get this experience, we will never have to drink again. Not only one day at a time, but we will never have to drink again. Not only that, we never have to feel bad again. We are given the tools to live in a way resulting in not having a single problem in life. What we are taught by this book contains the solution to every problem that may arise. In the years since I had that experience I was talking about, I haven't really had any problems at all. This may sound a little arrogant, but it's the truth. It doesn't mean a lot of things haven't happened in my life, because of course it did. It does in everyone's life. You can be fired from work, loved ones get sick, friends go away, you get sick, cars break down, money runs out, and so on. The difference when living these principles is that it's not really have to be a problem. I can see it for what it is, do the right thing and put it aside. Get through it with grace and dignity and without having to hurt others or myself along the way. Thanks to that, I don't have to sink in depression and unmanageability. I can surely manage very well. And this is the result of using these principles in all of our affairs. Pain is perhaps inevitable, but suffering is now optional. Of course, this presupposes that I use and develop what I have received. I do this through work and self-sacrifice for others, trying to show this way of life to as many as I can, through a lot of contacts with newcomers and with others who share the same solution. And together we work for the same thing, and then the fellowship we share the same problem in has suddenly become something else. It has become the fellowship of the spirit. We now not only share the same problem, we also share the same solution to it. If my home group in this way can become a fellowship of the spirit instead of just a fellowship, we will also see the same numbers as in the preface. They are extraordinary, but not unattainable at all. If we do what they did, we will have the same result. There is no difference when it comes to this. It's the same as with the steps. If we do what they did, we will get the same result. I would like to end with a beautiful reading I found. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to find the source of it, but it so well tells us what we have in our hands, about what value this is and why it's so important to give this to others, nothing else. Here it is. This book reveals the mind of God for alcoholics, the state alcoholics are in, a way of salvation for alcoholics, the doom of alcoholics, and the happiness of alcoholics. Its doctrines are sacred, its precepts are binding, its histories are true, and its decisions are immutable. We read it to be wise, believe it to be safe, and practice it to stay sober. It contains light to direct us, food to support us, and comfort to share us. It's the alcoholic's map and the compass of the group. In it, contented sobriety is open for us and the gates of hell disclosed. Sobriety is its grand subject, are good its design, and the glory of contented sobriety its end. It should fill the memory, rule the heart, and guide the feet. Read it slowly, frequently, prayerfully. It's a gold mine of wealth, a paradise of glory, and a river of pleasure. It involves highest responsibility, will reward greatest labor, and condemn all alcoholics who trifle with its contents. Owned, it is riches. Studied, it is wisdom. Trusted, it is salvation. Loved, it is character. And obeyed, it is power. This is what we gained access to. Let's talk about this and thereby help others survive. Thank you.